Hey guys, in today's video, I want to preview the 2025 Roland Garros men's semifinals. But before I do so, I want to acknowledge Boisson, who is in the semifinals. Who would have predicted that? What I find incredible is that she was ranked number 24 in France, and now she's projected to be ranked number 1 in France. What an incredible story, and what an incredible player. The forehand is so dangerous, and I think what's catching a lot of players off guard is the heaviness of it, because generally the spin has increased on the WTA Tour, but not necessarily the height of the spin. I think this is one reason why Coco Gauff, who beat Madison Keys today, is so dangerous on the clay, because her forehand is very spinny and it goes a little bit higher. And the reason why heavy topspin forehand that also happens to be higher is a very effective strategy on the WTA Tour, because players generally play closer to the baseline compared to the men, and a lot of players like taking the ball early, and when the ball is hit either with a flat trajectory and with a lot of topspin, or is hit with less topspin and a flat trajectory, you can get away with standing closer to the baseline and taking balls earlier. However, especially on clay, when someone hits the ball higher and heavier, it becomes very challenging to take that ball early, and this was a big struggle for Mira Andreeva today, and is one of the reasons why she ended up losing to Boisson. In my last video, I talked about Boisson reminding me of Sam Stosur. She has a very unorthodox game for the WTA Tour. She slices a lot of backhands. She has a very aggressive loading position on the serve, and like I already said, her forehand is not like a WTA forehand, and I'm not talking about the backswing length. I'm talking about the fact that generally WTA forehands are not as high bouncing. They have more of a flat ball trajectory. So this is a very dangerous player, and I do think that she's going to have chances against Coco Gauff. I've been covering Roland Garros and uploading videos almost on a daily basis, but yesterday I decided not to upload a video because I was quite conflicted on the Musetti ball kick incident. And the problem with this is not necessarily the fact that Musetti didn't get disqualified, but it's the inconsistency. And Tiafoe did refer to this in the post-match press conference, but I will say that it's not a good look for players to look for the DQ. I think, for example, what Bublik did in Dubai when he faced Rublev, who was disqualified, Bublik wanted to continue playing and beat Rublev fair and square. So I understand where Tiafoe is coming from, appearing to ask for a DQ by inquiring with the umpire, but it is for sure not a good look. One example of opponents pushing for a DQ was last year in doubles, where Bouzkova and Tormo were pushing the chair umpire for a DQ. And what happened was somewhat similar to the Musetti incident, where Kato hit the ball to the other side. This was not done out of anger. She was just redirecting the ball to the other side. And the ball kid wasn't paying attention and realized the ball was coming very late and got hit with the ball and then started crying. Kato went over to the other side, and while she was doing that, Bouzkova and Tormo were pushing for the DQ. And at first, the umpire had given out a warning, but then after the pressure from the opponents, he ended up disqualifying. Now let's talk about Musetti's tennis. So a few days ago, I talked about Musetti being the second best clay court player this season. Of course, the context is that Sinner entered the clay court season too late. But Musetti is a very dangerous player on clay for many reasons. He has phenomenal ground strokes. He moves really well. But one shot in particular that makes Musetti so good on clay is how he defends drop shots. And this is a shot that's often ignored in practice, and this is something that I do practice with my players. And I will feature a drill video sometime this year with exercises how you can practice defending drop shots. But Musetti is so crafty when he runs down those balls. He can angle the ball very close to the net. He can also go deep if he wants to. He has exceptional feel when he has to sprint very fast. And that combination is something that's very unique to tennis, and it's something that's very difficult to do. Having the ability to sprint full blast, but then also applying very soft hands once you get to the ball. That's something that's extremely difficult to do, and Musetti does it better than most players. Now, will Musetti have a chance against Alcaraz? Well, they played each other twice in this clay court season, and the match in Monte Carlo was actually pretty tight. Musetti won the first set, and then towards the end of the second set, he got hurt. So I do think that he could have made that match very complicated for Carlos Alcaraz. The match in Rome in the semifinals was also somewhat complicated. So I do think that Musetti plays Alcaraz well. However, we are seeing the best version ever of Carlos Alcaraz. He is finally putting together consistent results. I've made many videos about Alcaraz, and there were a lot of them where I covered Carlos Alcaraz losing to players that he shouldn't be losing to. It is my belief that Carlos Alcaraz has improved his mental game tremendously. He's not only putting together consistent results, but during this clay court season, he's also figuring out a way to win matches when he's not playing well, something that all great champions have in common. And he's also shown that he can reach his absolute top level. For example, in the match against Sinner in Rome, but also in the match against Tommy Paul. Carlos Alcaraz, as he said in the post-match press conference, was hitting winners with his eyes closed. Now, Tommy wasn't 100% fit. He wasn't moving as well as he normally does, and he does play Carlos Alcaraz well. And the result was absolutely brutal. Tommy Paul only got one game in the first two sets. Alcaraz very much destroyed Paul like Sinner destroys other opponents. Alcaraz held the first game in the first set, and the second game where Paul was serving was a 10-minute game that broke the match wide open for Alcaraz. In my opinion, if Tommy Paul holds that game, I still think Alcaraz wins in straight sets, but it's going to be a much tighter straight sets victory and not 6-0, 6-1 in the first two sets. But nevertheless, Carlos Alcaraz is playing the best tennis of his life, and he is the huge favorite in the semifinal match against Musetti. Now, Sinner against Bublik was very interesting, and prior to this match, I thought that Bublik could complicate things for Sinner, and I do think that he did that to some extent in the second set where Sinner was making some errors. And I think the errors actually started late in that first set that went, again, 6-1 for Sinner, where Bublik was celebrating after getting the first game at 5-0. Sinner is absolutely destroying everyone on tour right now with the exception of Carlos Alcaraz. But I do think that Bublik's unorthodox game style with a tremendous amount of drop shots is the solution against Sinner, and it's going to be interesting to see what Djokovic is going to do against Sinner. He hit against Zverev today, but we're going to get to that later, so stay tuned until the end of the video. But in the case of Bublik, the problem regarding his game style is that the drop shot requires good positioning in the court, and it requires the player to be stable because the drop shot is best executed when it's an offensive shot. And it's very difficult to play offense against Jannik Sinner, who's absolutely destroying the ball, not only in a neutral rally situation, but also on defense. So I think where Bublik's game has some limitations is the fact that he doesn't have the same ability as Alcaraz, for example, to change the height of the ball and also to come to the net more frequently. I think a player has to throw everything at Sinner to have a chance of beating him. You have to utilize drop shots to break his rhythm. You have to change the height of the ball and make Sinner hit those jumping two-handed backhands. You have to come to the net and put pressure on Sinner and make him hit passing shots. And most importantly, you have to serve well because Sinner has the best return game in the world based on shot quality. There's shot quality and there's the ATP leaderboard. So Alex de Minaur is ranked number 1 and return stats on the ATP leaderboard, but when it comes to shot quality, Jannik Sinner has the best return in the world. So for anyone to have a chance of beating Sinner, the serve has to be exceptional, and that's what Carlos Alcaraz was able to do in that Rome final. He was serving incredibly well when it mattered the most. And Bublik, unfortunately, only served well in that second set, and he was getting broken left and right in both the first and the third set, and for that reason, he had very few chances to win this match. And last but not least, let's talk about Djokovic against Zverev. And I want to remind you guys of something that Djokovic said not long ago. And it was after losing to Arnaldi in Madrid. He said that he's not sure if he's ever going to come back to Madrid. And naturally, people thought it's over for Novak. He did not play well in that match. And the previous match was the straight set loss to Tabilo in Monte Carlo that made absolutely no sense. So everybody wrote Novak off at that particular moment in time. And I think even Novak Djokovic himself lost the belief in his own game, and it sounded like he was close to being done. I mean, why would he make a statement like that he wasn't sure whether he was going to come back to Madrid? But I've been following Novak between the Madrid tournament and the Geneva tournament, and he decided, interestingly, to skip Rome, and I think it was a phenomenal decision because he actually trained like a maniac between Madrid and Geneva and got himself in incredible shape. And we've heard so many times with this long tennis season that players don't have a chance to get better and work on their fitness when they're going from one tournament to another. Players can work on their fitness and get better or maybe tinker with the technique when they have a block of time off in between tournaments. And I think this was a genius decision for Novak Djokovic because he came out in Geneva a completely different player. The old Novak Djokovic won that tournament, was playing spotless tennis in the first 4 rounds, not losing a set. And in the match against Zverev, Novak Djokovic showed a fitness level that's insane for a 38-year-old. At certain times in this match, Zverev was playing very aggressive, hitting ground strokes from one corner into another. And when you hear Novak Djokovic start to grunt louder and louder, and he sometimes even grunts while he's running, something I talked about in this video, you know that Djokovic has activated his grind mode. And for any young players watching, when you see a 38-year-old fight like Novak Djokovic fought in this match, this has to motivate you because Novak earned this victory the hard way. In that fourth set, I saw some of the most entertaining rallies that I've seen all year, where Novak Djokovic afterwards looked absolutely gassed. We have to put into context what this guy is doing at 38 years old, making the semifinals of Australia and making the semifinals of Roland Garros the hard way. Because one thing that I'm seeing from Novak now that I haven't seen before is, as I've been saying all year long, not a decline in athleticism. If you watch this match against Zverev and you're seeing a decline in athleticism, I don't know what you're looking at. The guy is unbelievably fast and he's running everything down and he's playing a 4-set match with incredible stamina. So it's not a decline in athleticism, but I do think that the overall power level of Novak Djokovic's ground strokes is slightly lower than it used to be. Now, this could be tactical. Maybe Novak Djokovic is going to come out against Jannik Sinner and start blasting the ball harder. Now, one thing that I've been noticing this entire year, and I made a video on this, is the improvement in the Novak Djokovic serve. There's a slight difference in his technique. He coils a little bit sooner and he's been serving well all year. And it's not only that. What I've noticed in Geneva and at Roland Garros is that when the service game gets tight, let's say it's 30-all or deuce, Novak Djokovic serves exceptionally well when it matters the most. Now, he might not necessarily hit an ace, but he's going to hit that serve close to the line. He's going to get a service winner, or he's going to start the rally offensively because of his great serve. Now, another thing that I saw from Novak in this match and also at the tournament in Geneva and the first 4 rounds was his exceptional serve and volley that he utilizes at very crucial moments in the match. The first time I ever saw Novak do this was when he was coached by Goran. I think Goran did encourage Novak to serve and volley more than he had before. If you guys remember that final win in Cincinnati where Djokovic beat Alcaraz in 2023, Novak Djokovic was volleying like Stefan Edberg on that one. So his serve and volley is not only clutch, it's also exceptional. Generally, the Djokovic volley has improved tremendously throughout the years. But there's another thing. I talked about the Bublik drop shot and how phenomenal it is. I talked many times about the Alcaraz drop shot and that he possibly has the greatest forehand drop shot in the history of tennis. But I haven't really discussed the Djokovic drop shot, and it is quite exceptional. And it is one of the reasons why he was able to beat Zverev in today's quarterfinal match. See, what was happening at some portions in this match, and especially deep in that 4th set, was Zverev not being able to put the ball away and Djokovic running everything down. And I do think that Djokovic was exhausted in that 4th set. And he didn't want these rallies to go on forever. And it appeared that they were going on forever. and he was drop shotting a lot to not only break the rhythm of Zverev and make him come forward, because as we know, Zverev stands far behind the baseline. But I do believe that Novak Djokovic also wanted these rallies to be over. And while the Novak Djokovic drop shot is not quite at the level of Alcaraz and Bublik, it is still quite exceptional. So will all these great attributes that I just described be enough to take out Sinner? I don't think so. And I've been saying this since the beginning of the year. I'm very doubtful that Djokovic can beat Sinner. I do believe that Djokovic can beat the old Alcaraz, and that's why I picked Djokovic to beat Alcaraz at last year's Olympics. But if Djokovic had to play Alcaraz tomorrow, I would pick Alcaraz. And I had a feeling that Djokovic was going to make the semifinals in this tournament, and prior to the tournament starting, I picked Sinner to beat Djokovic in the semifinals. So let me give you my reasoning for it. So the reason why I think Djokovic can't beat Alcaraz anymore at this level is because Alcaraz is a different player since Monte Carlo. I do think that the Alcaraz level has gone up, if you can believe it. I do think that we're seeing the best version of Alcaraz that we're seeing so far. He's proven that with that final win against Sinner in Rome. We are also seeing the best version of Sinner. So I think that Sinner now is a better player than he was even last year. And I've talked ad nauseum about the Davis Cup match between Sinner and Djokovic, where Djokovic's results started to go down and Sinner's results started to go up. And ever since that match, there has been something weird between Sinner and Djokovic. Not only on the court, with Djokovic not being able to beat him, he lost to him every time they played. In Australia 2024, he was able to win the third set, but it was a pretty comfortable win for Sinner. He blew him off the court in the first two sets. Then they played each other in Shanghai. Djokovic was up 5-4 in the first set. Sinner won that first set in a tiebreak and then blew him off the court in the second set. They did play a very tight match at the Six Kings Slam that Sinner won. So Sinner has had Djokovic's number, but there is something else at play here. And I'm not going to speculate on anything that I don't know about, but there's my feeling that Djokovic has a much better relationship to Alcaraz than he has to Sinner. Now, I'm not saying that there's bad blood, but I do think that the dynamics are quite different when it comes to Djokovic versus Sinner. So for that reason, I think this makes the Sinner-Djokovic matchup even more interesting than the Djokovic-Alcaraz matchup. And it is also true that Novak Djokovic is the most driven player of all time. He's broken all the records, but he's finding even more records to break. So there's no limit to Djokovic achieving great things in the game of tennis. And I do believe that one of these goals is to beat Sinner at the most important stages of a Grand Slam tournament. Again, I don't quite think this is possible. He will have to throw everything there is at Sinner. He's going to have to change the height of the ball, which he's highly capable of doing. He's even moonballed a little bit today against Zverev. He's going to have to continue using the drop shot. He's going to have to serve exceptionally well. He's going to have to come to the net. And on top of all that, he's also going to have to blast, because his regular ball speed is not enough to challenge Sinner. What happened in those previous matches, like I said, Sinner was able to blow him off the court in some sets. So Djokovic's ball speed has to go up, and at the same time he has to continue to be consistent, because what happens with a lot of players that face Sinner, they know that they have to hit harder and they start missing more. Now on top of all that, if this match gets tight, Sinner will also have to start making some mistakes like he did in that match against Alcaraz in Rome. So for all this to take place, I just don't see it, and it's for that reason why I think Sinner will face Alcaraz in the final of Roland Garros.